Crucial Conversations in Library Management, SLIS 704 Book Report by Kytt Pavlakovich. The first case study we'll be looking at today is case number 1, Care, but Not Too Much. The main players here are Rose, who is a reference librarian, Fran, the library administrator, and they both work at Bartlett County Community College Library. There are several relevant issues to this case. Rose is a perfectionist with strong attention to detail. Fran is also good at her job, but is a big picture thinker, often leaving details to be addressed by others. They've worked on a library support workshop for 2 years. This is where Rose first noticed Fran's tendency to take credit for her work. Fran and Rose are working together on a committee to complete an online tutorial. Rose quickly completed her part of the work, while Fran took some time to do hers. When Fran completed her part of the work, she mailed everyone in the committee both of their projects and forgot to put Rose's name in the email, therefore making it look as if Rose had no part in the project whatsoever. Rose is naturally upset that Fran took credit and made her look bad, and contemplates sending a sarcastic email to Fran and the entire committee, but decides against it because Fran would be clueless as to why anyway. Rose decides to take the fool's choice here and remains silent. She doesn't have to interact with Fran for 2 weeks when the next committee meeting is scheduled. For this particular case, we don't need more information. We have all we need to create a strategy and techniques for how Rose should handle this situation. The first technique I suggest that Rose start with is from Crucial Conversations, Chapter 3, Start with Heart, on page 43. Rose needs to ask herself what she really wants for herself, Fran, the library, and her and Fran's relationship. Rose must also refuse the fool's choice which she has done in the past, which is to stay silent. She must clarify also what she doesn't want. Here is the question she should ask. How can I talk to Fran about my concerns over her taking credit for my work and not damage our professional relationship? On page 58 in Crucial Conversations, Chapter 4, Learn to Look, Rose needs to address her style under stress, which appears to be silence. First, she considered masking her feelings with sarcasm, and now she is considering avoiding talking to Fran about it altogether for the second time in their working relationship. I'll also suggest that Rose make it safe from Chapter 5 of Crucial Conversations, beginning on page 76. She needs to realize that they have a mutual purpose. They both volunteered to be on a committee and work on the tutorial together. They both want to create a useful tutorial and demonstrate that they are capable of working in a team. In order to effectively address her issues with Fran, Rose also needs to master her story, which is in Chapter 6 of Crucial Conversations, beginning on page 112. Rose needs to address her feelings before confronting Fran about her lack of communication to the committee that Rose also completed half of the project. Rose is feeling quite a few emotions right now. She's feeling angry, disappointed, and unappreciated for her hard work. She is also in a form of silence. The story she has created describes Fran as a slacker who takes credit for Rose's hard work. The only evidence Rose has to support her story is Fran left her name out of the email she sent to all of the committee members. Rose is using what the Crucial Conversations textbook described in page 118, a villain story. Assuming Fran has malicious intent when she left her name off of the email to the committee. Rose is also in a helpless story, figuring she will just have to care less and that there's nothing she can do to help Fran and her become a better team. After all, Fran can't change. What role did Rose play in this story? She, after all, didn't tell Fran Fran that this had affected her previously when she had left her name off of an idea. Why would a reasonable, rational person leave Rose's name off an email with a tutorial they both worked on? Perhaps Fran forgot to put her name on the email, or Fran felt since the library director thanked them publicly, there was no need to address that they both worked on the tutorial since it was common knowledge. After all, Fran is not detail-oriented. Rose really wants to create a tutorial with Fran, and she wants them both to get credit for their own work. What should she do right now if she really wanted those results? Set up a meeting with Fran to discuss this pattern of behavior. Finally, on Chapter 7, page 136, Rose needs to state her path. She needs to share the facts, tell her story, ask for Fran's path, talk tentatively, and encourage testing. My overall strategy for Rose is to finally break the silence and communicate with Fran about how her actions have made her feel. She'll have to state her path. Fran, I noticed you didn't mention my name in the email you sent to all of the committee members. This has been a pattern I've noticed while working with you, that your wording in emails makes it seem as though you're taking credit for the work I did on something as well. Is that something you meant to do? Notice how Rose poised the question to Fran in an unaccusatory way. If she had been accusatory, this may have turned the conversation to a fight-or-flight response from Fran. Instead, she chose to keep with the facts, explain her feelings, and ask Fran for her story. She did all of this while speaking tentatively. She can encourage testing by saying, maybe I'm seeing things differently. How do you feel about what I've just said? Rose and Fran's overall goal should be to maintain a good working relationship with each other and discuss ways they can improve upon their teamwork in the future. Fran and Rose should perhaps communicate about their expectations of one another and lay out an outline or a timetable of when things should be completed in the future. Often emails can leave us somewhat lost in translation. That's why I suggest that Rose strive to communicate with Fran in person, since she's a better listener by ear than she is an email reader. My final conclusion is that Rose needs to speak to Fran. There's no other way around it. If she continues to remain silent, they will eventually break up as a team, and the library director would be incredibly disappointed at their failure as a team, since that is his new initiative. Once Fran and Rose speak to each other, they'll be able to understand where they both are coming from and state each other's paths.
The second case we're going to be looking at today is case number 18, Friends or Sexual Harassment. Who decides? Our main players for this case are Joyce, who is an adult student and part-time reference assistant, Ned, who is the head of reference, and Sandra, who is a full-time library staff member at Johnsonville State University Library. Here are the relevant issues to this case. Joyce is an adult student who is divorced with 2 grown children. She wants to work on campus so she could move into a dormitory and rent out her house. She found a job working at Johnsonville State University Library. Ned, who is her boss, and she have grown closer and have now begun dating. Ned and Joyce start holding hands on campus and touching each other unnecessarily at work. Sandra has worked in the library for over 23 years. She is seen by her peers and supervisors as a gossip and a busybody. Sandra saw Joyce and Ned holding hands on campus and thus started closely watching their behavior at work. Sandra begins telling her peers that Ned is sexually harassing Julia. Sandra then threatens to go to the dean's office to report Julia if she doesn't stop it. Do we need more information? Yes, we do need more information for this case. We need to know what the policies of Johnsonville State University's Human Resource Department is on employee-supervisor relationships. and also if it matters whether or not Julia is a student, even though she's an adult, dating an adult supervisor that works at the library named Ned. Also, it would be good to know exactly what Sandra finds uncomfortable about seeing the couple hold hands on campus. If she's claiming that she's uncomfortable and there are legal ramifications, a legal counsel should definitely consult with the library on whether or not these laws would affect Ned and Julia's relationship. First technique, again, I will start with is start with heart from the Crucial Conversations textbook on chapter 3, page 43. Sandra needs to ask herself what she really wants for herself, Julia, Ned, the library, the university, and all of their relationships. Sandra then needs to consider an and statement. How can I talk to Ned and Julia about my uncomfortableness over their touching at work without seeming like a busybody, and keep their professional relationship with me on good terms? The next technique I suggest that Sandra use is learn to look. Sandra's style under stress appears to be fight. She considered going straight to HR without really consulting Julia or Ned about their behavior. First, she should talk to them without having to get them in trouble. In order to make sure everyone stays calm when Sandra has the conversation with Ned and Julia is to make it safe from chapter 7, page 76 of the Crucial Conversations textbook. Sandra needs to make sure that she shows a mutual respect for both Ned and Julia, regardless of their position. After all, Ned seems to be a higher up than her, so she should tread lightly to make them feel safe enough to have a conversation with her without anyone getting upset. Sandra then needs to address her feelings before confronting Ned and Julia about why she feels this way. She needs to master her story from chapter 6 of the Crucial Conversations textbook on page 112. Sandra is feeling upset and uncomfortable, perhaps even jealous about Julia and Ned's relationship. Her story is that Ned hired Julia as a student employee, regardless of her age, and that Ned did so because he is attracted to Julia and is making Julia feel as though she must return Ned's affections so that she can keep her job. The facts of Sandra's story are she has witnessed Ned and Julia holding hands on campus. She has also noticed afterwards that the two like to be close to one another when they are at work. Sandra should sit down and consider what other explanations are possible besides the story she has created for Ned and Julia. Perhaps Julia genuinely likes Ned, and Ned likes Julia because the two have a lot in common. Perhaps Ned doesn't see anything wrong with dating Julia, since what would I do right now if I really wanted these results? What does she want? She wants the Julia and Ned situation to stop being flaunted in her face, probably. She also wants to make sure that Ned is not sexually harassing Julia. So she needs to set up a meeting again. And she also needs to check with the HR policies to make sure they aren't in violation of any of the university's rules. She should do this before she sets up a meeting with Ned and Julia, so if there are violations, she can discuss them with Ned and Julia together and what they can do to change the way they behave in public to meet the university guidelines. Next, Sandra should set up a meeting with Ned and Julia and state her path from chapter 7, page 136 of the Crucial Conversations textbook. She should share the facts, tell her story, ask for Ned and Julia's path, talk tentatively, and encourage testing. This is how I suggest Sandra state her path. Ned and Julia, I noticed you two holding hands on campus and that you have been pretty close in the library. This has made me concerned because of the HR policy that supervisors are not allowed to have romantic relationships with students. Maybe I'm off base though. Do you two have another view of the situations? Once again, I've suggested that Sandra not be accusatory in her path stating. Notice how she did not accuse Ned of sexually harassing Julia. She simply stated the facts, told them how it was making her feel and why, and then asked for their side of the story. Everyone's goal here should be to make sure they are following HR guidelines while maintaining a good working relationship. Ned and Julia must consult with HR whether or not their relationship is actually inappropriate, as Sandra is not an HR consultant. She may have found the correct HR documents, we don't know. Still, to prevent any confusion, Julia and Ned should go to HR and disclose their relationship and find out if what they're doing will affect their jobs or if they should cease and desist. Again, perhaps there's another explanation. Maybe Julia is having a rough time with her ex-husband and Ned has just been there to comfort her. We don't really know. We don't have that information from this story. But if Sandra asks them for their story, perhaps then she'll have her answer and this can be stopped before it reaches HR. This is why it's important to have a conversation with the parties involved before taking something immediately to higher ups. If it's relatively bland, I feel like this is okay to do. Now, if Julia had been a young student of 18, I'd say that was a definite issue and that Sandra should have reported it immediately. But since this is somewhat of a different situation, I think it's best to consult with them first. My final conclusion is that Sandra should get to the bottom of what's going on with Ned and Julia, as she very well could be right. Maybe Julia does feel sexually harassed, which is why she needs to talk to both of them and find out their motives, find out what's going on in their lives before she takes this directly to HR. As I said previously, possible consequences of her actions could be they're both fired, so it would be better to consult with them so she doesn't get it wrong. Also, possible consequences are that Julia is no longer sexually harassed. That would be great if that is what is occurring, but Sandra needs to realize that what she has seen is not necessarily their story. It's her story, and she needs to speak with them to find out their path. The third case we'll be talking about today is case 17. Is it just a little white lie? The main players here are Vera, who is a legal specialist, Carla, an archivist, and Elsa, a librarian at Bartlett County Museum and Archives. The relevant issues here are that Vera and Carla have been working at Bartlett County Museum and Archives for a while, whereas Elsa is a new member of the team. Vera and Carla have already asked for the library director to sign off on the new guidelines for the Native American collection. Carla forgot to leave Elsa a note about a phone call inquiring about a book that Carla had planned on removing from the collection but had not done so yet. Elsa does not agree with Carla or Vera about removing books from the collection and wants to speak to the director or Carla or Vera about it. Need more information for this particular case? I think yes, we do. We need to know what the exact guidelines are for this particular moving the Native American collection possibly, or what they're supposed to keep. We need to know what the guidelines are in order to really make an assessment of what Elsa should do. We also need to know exactly what the director told Carla and Vera, because They may think that they got approval, but we don't really know what the director told them to do. If she knows all of the exact details of the guidelines, we don't know if the director is aware of all of that, since Carla and Vera kind of pushed their side of the argument. So those would be good things to try and investigate before going to have a conversation with either the director, Carla, or Vera. Those are good things for Elsa to do. Once again, I'm going to suggest that Elsa start with heart from the Crucial Conversations textbook, Chapter 3, page 43. What does Elsa really want for herself, the museum and archive, the director, and Carla and Vera? What does she want out of all of their relationships? She needs to refuse the fool's choice here to stay silent or to get violent. It seems as if she is kind of leaning towards the middle of both of those two. She's upset because she definitely believes that no book should be removed, especially ones that someone wants to read. That's a library ethic of hers. But she needs to also understand that they both want the same thing. They both want to make the library a great place that everybody enjoys, and they also want to follow county guidelines at the same time without stirring up too much trouble. As the case said, this particular guideline, if not implemented, may cause them to lose some kind of funding or support with the rest of the county libraries. So that's something to consider. She also needs to clarify what she doesn't want here. She needs to say, how can I talk to Vera and Carla about my concerns over whether they should take books out of the collection and maintain a good working relationship with them, one that is blossoming and is new. She also can ask, how can I talk to the library director about my concerns over whether or not Carla and Vera should be taking books out of the collection and possibly even lying to patrons who have inquired about them, and not have the director think that she is undermining her authority. Elsa also needs to make sure she's on top of her game before she has this kind of conversation with anyone, whether it be the director, Carla, Vera, or all of them together. She needs to make sure that she knows her style under stress. Now, I'm not particularly sure from the context of this case what her style is. Like I said earlier, she may be leaning more towards the middle. She could do either thing. So she needs to be aware of that and look for indicators that the library director, Carla, or Vera don't feel safe speaking to her. And she needs to step out of the conversation, make it safe, and then come back. This is all from Chapter 4, Learn to Look, from the Crucial Conversations textbook on page 58. One of the things Elsa can do to make it safe if the conversation becomes unsafe is to discover what their mutual purpose is, what the director, Carla, Vera, and Elsa all want. They want to have a successful library that's funded by the county and whoever else funds them, and they want to provide good service to their patrons. I don't think that they really intentionally want to lie to their patrons, but they also don't want to offend anybody. Elsa is a little less concerned about offending people. She wants to make sure that the library has all the materials they need. And I don't think that Vera, Carla, or the library director really feel otherwise, and they should discuss that with themselves, get back to their roots, talk about library ethics and how they really feel. Before Elsa has a conversation with any of these people, she needs to master her story, which is found in Chapter 5 of the Crucial Conversations textbook on page 76. Now that they've discovered they have a mutual purpose, or she has, that they want to be successful in the museum for their patrons, but also receive funding and not step on anybody's toes, which is impossible to do, but it's still a mutual purpose. That's what they strive to do, and to be as honest as possible. I think Elsa needs to think about how she's feeling. She feels probably disappointed or in disbelief that another archivist or another librarian is considering removing items from the collection and lying to other patrons. She's probably kind of angry too. She needs to address those feelings before confronting Elsa, Vera, or Courtney, especially Courtney, the library director, because she does not want to come off as she's accusatory of anybody. We've talked about that before. So, Elsa needs to think about why she's feeling that way. What is her story for Vera, Carla, and Courtney, the library director? She needs to come up with her story or think of why she feels this way about the collection possibly being brought into question or moved or just completely taken out. She needs to think about the story she's made up in her head. She probably thinks that Carla had some kind of manipulative tactic, not leaving her a note. She did that on purpose, and she did it on purpose telling the patron that the book, she couldn't find it, or that she totally is out to get all the books out of the collection. She is a villain. I think Carla is her main villain in this story. Therefore, if Carla is her main villain in this story, she probably feels like Carla misled the library director in asking her to implement all of the guidelines. She must not have told her exactly what that entailed. But, as always, Elsa needs to think about what other possible explanations there could be for Carla not leaving her a note, lying to the patron, and somehow getting the library director to sign off on something that goes against everything she believes in. A possible other explanation could be that Carla forgot to leave her a note. It was completely unintentional. That Carla feels bad about removing the book from the collection, but she's just trying to follow the guidelines that were given to her, and Vera told her that legally they have to do it, and the library director agrees with all those assumptions, in which case Elsa should probably discuss them with just Vera, the legal analyst, and find out if what they're doing is legal and if there is something they can do otherwise, like another option, a compromise. Crucial Conversations textbook does not necessarily agree with compromising, but here it may be the only resort. Or they can come up with a completely new strategy. It doesn't seem like any of the other libraries are talking about removing things from their collections, so maybe they should talk to other people. This course of action, I'm going to make sure that Elsa decides that she wants to talk to everyone. I think that's the best course. She needs to talk to the library director, Carla, and Vera all at once, so nobody thinks they're going behind each other's backs. I think that's what kind of got this to happen in the first place. Elsa felt like while she was gone, Vera and Carla went behind her back and got the library director to prove something they lied about. I think they all need to discuss it together. So when Elsa meets with the three, she needs to state her path very carefully, which is Chapter 7, page 136 of the Crucial Conversations textbook. She should share the facts of the story, which are a patron's upset that Carla removed the book from the collection and did not call her back. Tell your story. Elsa needs to tell her story. She needs to tell them the facts, and then she needs to say, I feel uncomfortable with removing items from the collection due to these guidelines. I haven't really reviewed the guidelines, and I don't know the legal parties to it. Could you please explain them? See how she's asking for them to share their path? And she's talking tentatively, like she's not sure she understands. She can encourage testing by asking them to show how it is a good idea for this library, for this museum and archives building to implement these guidelines. My goal for them all meeting together and discussing their issues with each other is to get everything out in the open. I think that Elsa is making some unfair assumptions about Carla, meaning to lie to the patron, meaning to maliciously leave the number so the patron would get upset. I think she believes that Carla possibly lied to the library director. So in order for them to clear the air, they all have to state their paths. So her goal should be to hear each one of their paths and then brainstorm together to come up with a possible solution that isn't the one they currently have. Now, that may not be possible. The library director may disagree with her, but if she makes her case well and states her path, remains calm in this crucial conversation, I think they all three will be able to come up with a better way to provide for their patrons. Like perhaps they can make up a system of phone calls that they get, count up how many phone calls they get about certain books wanting to be kept in the collection, and then come up with some kind of diagram. I don't know. Something like that to assess their collection. Maybe there are certain things that need to be taken out or moved to special collections and not open to the public viewing. I'm not sure. Maybe they could do a scan and deliver service. There's a lot of things, a lot of different options with this particular solution they want to come up with. But the goal is for them to all maintain a great working relationship. Elsa's new. You don't want to start off the bat questioning the director, so she's got to be very careful and tread lightly here so she doesn't offend anybody. And she's got to maintain her composure and look and make sure that everybody's not getting upset. They don't feel safe because she's new and they don't know her and they don't really, maybe don't trust her yet. The final conclusion I have for this is that all three individuals will come together, talk about the situation in a calm manner. If anyone gets upset, Vera, the library director, or Carla, Elsa should step out of the conversation, make them feel safe by maybe contrasting what she's not saying. She's not calling Carla a liar. She's trying to merely talk about how they can come to a good resolution because she doesn't really agree with the situation at hand. And the library director, she can say, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to question your authority, but I just wanted to know where you were coming from on this. Getting her feedback, her path. She wants everybody to share their paths and come to a mutual purpose together. They might have to make one up. I'm not sure what will happen, but if they add all of their paths to the pool of shared meaning, I think that this will come up with better results than it is currently. I strongly agree with Elsa that she should not remove items from the collection, especially if she doesn't really know why they're doing it. So all information needs to be put forth as much as possible, and they all need to talk about it and share their meanings together. And I think that's the best way to come up with the final solution for this. And here are my references. The first one is the Crucial Conversations textbook, and the second group are the ones Spark provided from the Noun project.